Sarah Chen stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her hands trembling as she applied lipstick for the third time. Tonight was the night she would meet Dr. Marcus Williams at the charity gala, and everything had to be perfect. But this wasn't about love or romance. This was about revenge. 3 years ago, Marcus had destroyed her family's medical practice with a single phone call. Her father, Dr. Robert Chen, had built his small clinic from nothing, serving the underprivileged community for over 20 years. When Marcus discovered that Robert was treating patients who couldn't pay full fees, he reported him to the medical board for unprofessional conduct and compromising medical standards. The investigation that followed was brutal. Even though Robert had done nothing illegal, the scandal ruined his reputation. Patients stopped coming, insurance companies dropped his practice, and within 6 months he lost everything. The stress gave him a heart attack that left him partially paralyzed. Sarah watched her proud father become a shadow of himself, spending his days staring out the window of their tiny apartment. Marcus Williams, meanwhile, continued to thrive. His private practice in the wealthy part of town made him millions. He appeared in magazines as one of the city's most eligible bachelors, driving expensive cars and living in a mansion. He had crushed her family without a second thought, and Sarah had spent 3 years planning her revenge. She had researched everything about him. She knew he was arrogant, believing himself superior to everyone around him. She knew he was attracted to intelligent, beautiful women who challenged him. Most importantly, she knew his greatest weakness was his ego and his need to be admired. Sarah had transformed herself completely. She finished her business degree, learned to speak like someone from high society, and even changed her appearance. Tonight she would become Emma Richardson, a successful marketing executive from another city. She had created fake business credentials, social media profiles, and even rented an expensive apartment in the right neighborhood. The plan was simple, but devastating. She would make Marcus fall in love with her, marry him, and then destroy his practice from the inside. She would expose his illegal tax evasion, his overcharging of insurance companies, and his cruel treatment of staff. She had already gathered evidence through a private investigator. All she needed was access to his personal files and computer systems as his wife. As Sarah arrived at the gala, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, all dressed in expensive clothes and discussing their latest business deals. She spotted Marcus immediately, surrounded by admirers as usual, his perfect smile hiding his cold heart. She approached slowly, timing her arrival perfectly. As she walked past his group, she pretended to trip slightly, causing her purse to spill its contents. Marcus, ever the gentleman in public, immediately rushed to help her collect her things. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice smooth and confident. Up close, she could see why women found him attractive. He was tall, well-dressed, and had the kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. "I'm so embarrassed," Sarah said, playing the role perfectly. "These shoes are beautiful, but definitely not practical." Marcus laughed, clearly charmed. "I'm Dr. Marcus Williams," he said, extending his hand. "And you are?" "Emma Richardson," she replied, shaking his hand and making sure to maintain eye contact. "I'm visiting from Boston for business." For the next hour they talked and danced. Sarah was careful to be interesting, but not too eager. She mentioned her successful marketing firm, her travels around the world, and her passion for helping medical practices improve their patient outreach. She could see Marcus becoming more interested with each conversation. "You know," Marcus said as the evening wound down, "I'd love to continue this conversation. Perhaps over dinner tomorrow?" Sarah pretended to consider it, checking her phone as if reviewing her schedule. "I suppose I could move a few things around," she said finally. "There's something about you that's quite intriguing, Dr. Williams." As she left the gala that night, Sarah felt a mixture of triumph and guilt. The first phase of her plan had worked perfectly. Marcus was clearly interested, and she had successfully established her false identity. But seeing him in person, watching him charm everyone around him while knowing what he had done to her father, only strengthened her resolve. She returned to her rented apartment and called her father. "How are you feeling today, Dad?" she asked gently. "The same," he replied, his voice tired and defeated. "The physical therapy isn't helping much. I keep thinking about the clinic, about all the patients who needed us." Sarah's heart hardened. Marcus Williams had stolen her father's purpose, his dignity, and his health. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of making him pay for every moment of pain he had caused her family. She would make him fall so deeply in love with her that losing her would destroy him, just as he had destroyed them. But as she prepared for bed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something about the evening felt different than she had expected. Marcus had seemed genuinely kind to the staff at the gala, and she had overheard him quietly arranging for a sick employee's medical bills to be covered. These small details didn't fit the monster she had built up in her mind over the past 3 years. She pushed these doubts away. People like Marcus were good at hiding their true nature behind acts of public charity. She had seen the evidence of his cruelty firsthand. Tomorrow, she would begin the most important performance of her life, and she couldn't afford to let false impressions derail her mission for justice. 3 months into their relationship, Sarah found herself in a position she hadn't anticipated. Marcus was falling for her exactly as planned, but something unexpected was happening to her as well. Every evening spent with him was becoming more complicated than the last. Their dinner dates had turned into weekend getaways. Marcus would surprise her with tickets to concerts or reservations at exclusive restaurants. He listened intently when she spoke, remembered small details about her preferences, and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions on everything from art to politics. The hardest part was that none of it felt forced or calculated. If she didn't know better, she would think he was actually a caring, attentive man. But Sarah reminded herself constantly of why she was there. During their intimate conversations, she carefully gathered information about his practice, his finances, and his business relationships. She learned about his computer passwords by watching him type, memorized his daily routines, and slowly built a mental map of his vulnerabilities. The breakthrough came when Marcus invited her to a medical conference in Chicago. "I'd love for you to meet some of my colleagues," he said over breakfast. "Your insights about marketing could really help some of these doctors improve their practices." Sarah agreed enthusiastically, seeing this as the perfect opportunity to gather more intelligence. At the conference, she watched Marcus interact with other medical professionals, expecting to see the arrogance and superiority she knew he possessed. Instead, she witnessed something that made her uncomfortable. During a panel discussion about healthcare accessibility, Marcus spoke passionately about the need for doctors to find ways to serve underprivileged communities. "We have a responsibility that goes beyond profit," he said to the audience. "Medicine is supposed to be about helping people, not just helping ourselves." After the panel, a young resident approached Marcus with questions about starting a free clinic. Sarah watched as Marcus spent 40 minutes giving detailed advice, sharing contacts, and even offering to fund part of the initiative. When the young doctor thanked him profusely, Marcus brushed off the gratitude with genuine humility. That evening, as they walked through downtown Chicago, Sarah couldn't contain her confusion any longer. "You seem really passionate about helping doctors serve poor communities," she said carefully. "Have you always felt that way?" Marcus stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "Actually, that's something I learned the hard way," he said. "A few years ago, I did something I deeply regret. There was this doctor, Robert Chen, who ran a small clinic serving low-income patients. I reported him to the medical board for what I thought were violations of proper procedures." Sarah's heart stopped beating for a moment. This was not how she expected this conversation to go. "What happened?" she managed to ask, her voice barely steady. "I destroyed his practice," Marcus said, his voice heavy with shame. "I was so focused on maintaining standards that I didn't understand what he was actually doing. He wasn't compromising care. He was finding creative ways to help people who couldn't afford traditional medical services. By the time I realized my mistake, it was too late. His practice was ruined, and he had a heart attack from the stress." Sarah felt like the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. "That must have been difficult for you," she said, fighting to keep her voice neutral. "It changed everything for me," Marcus continued. "I tried to find Dr. Chen to apologize and offer to help rebuild his practice, but he had moved away. I heard his daughter blamed me for everything that happened, and she was absolutely right too. I've spent the last 3 years trying to make up for that mistake by supporting other doctors who serve underprivileged communities." They walked in, silence for several blocks while Sarah processed this information. Everything she thought she knew about Marcus was being turned upside down. The private investigator had never mentioned Marcus's attempts to find her father, or his charitable work supporting community clinics. Do you ever wonder if you'll get a chance to make it right with that doctor? Sarah asked, testing him further. Every day, Marcus replied immediately. I keep hoping that somehow I'll find a way to apologize and help repair the damage I caused. It's the biggest regret of my life. That night, alone in her hotel room, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed feeling completely lost. For 3 years, she had built her entire identity around hatred for Marcus Williams. She had planned every detail of her revenge, sustained herself with thoughts of his downfall, and convinced herself that destroying him would somehow heal her father. But the man she had spent 3 months getting to know didn't match the villain she had created in her mind. Yes, he had made a terrible mistake that hurt her family, but he clearly understood the gravity of what he had done and was genuinely trying to make amends. She called her father that night, something she rarely did when traveling with Marcus. Dad, I need to ask you something, she said. After the practice closed, did anyone ever try to contact you? Maybe to apologize or offer help? There was a long pause. There were some calls, her father said slowly. From that doctor's office, Williams, I think. But I was too angry and hurt to talk to anyone. Your mother handled those calls and told them not to contact us again. Why do you ask? Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of new understanding. No reason, Dad. I was just curious. After hanging up, Sarah stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't the confident, determined person she had been 3 months ago. She was someone caught between two truths, her family's pain and Marcus's genuine remorse. She had two choices. She could continue with her original plan, destroy Marcus's life and have her revenge, or she could find the courage to tell him the truth about who she really was and see if they could find a way to heal the damage together. But there was a third option that terrified her most of all. The possibility that her feelings for Marcus had become real, and that everything she thought she wanted had changed completely. 6 months after their first meeting, Marcus proposed to Sarah on a quiet beach in Maine. He had planned everything perfectly, from the sunset timing to her favorite flowers scattered in the sand. As he knelt before her with the ring, his eyes filled with love and hope, Sarah felt her carefully constructed world beginning to collapse. Emma Richardson, he said, using the false name she had given him. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Will you marry me? Looking down at this man who had unknowingly caused her family so much pain, but who had also shown her more genuine love and kindness than she had ever experienced, Sarah felt torn between two different futures. She could say yes and continue living the lie, or she could finally tell him the truth and risk losing everything. Yes, she whispered, because in that moment, she realized she had fallen completely in love with him, and the thought of losing him was more terrifying than continuing to deceive him. The wedding planning consumed the next 4 months. Marcus insisted on involving his family and closest friends, which meant Sarah had to maintain her false identity with an ever-growing circle of people. She created elaborate backstories about her fictional family in Boston, her imaginary childhood, and her fake career achievements. The hardest part was watching Marcus's genuine excitement about their future together. He talked constantly about the life they would build, the family they might have, and the good they could do together with their combined resources. He even suggested they start a foundation to help struggling medical practices, an idea that made Sarah's guilt almost unbearable. During one of their wedding planning sessions, Marcus's mother pulled Sarah aside. I've never seen my son this happy, she said warmly. He went through such a dark period a few years ago after some professional troubles, but you've brought light back into his life. Sarah smiled and nodded, but inside she was screaming. Everything Marcus's mother described as his dark period was the time when he was dealing with the guilt of destroying her father's practice. She was being praised for healing the very wounds her family had created. The week before the wedding, Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. She called her father and invited him to attend the ceremony. Dad, I'm getting married, she said during their phone call. I know it's sudden, but I'd really love for you to be there. Her father was quiet for a long time. Sarah, are you sure about this? You've been so secretive about this man. I don't even know his full name. His name is Marcus Williams, Sarah said, testing the waters. He's a doctor. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, her father spoke, his voice shaking with emotion. Marcus Williams, The doctor who destroyed our practice? Sarah had expected anger, but instead her father sounded more confused than furious. Dad, I need to tell you something, she began, but he interrupted her. Sarah, what have you done? He asked, and something in his tone suggested he understood more than she had expected. I planned to destroy him, she admitted. I wanted to make him pay for what he did to us. But Dad, he's not the monster I thought he was. He spent years trying to make up for his mistake. Oh, sweetheart, her father said, his voice full of sadness. I was wondering when you would figure it out. Figure what out? 6 months after the practice closed, Dr. Williams called me personally. Not through his office, but from his cell phone. He apologized for over an hour and offered to help me restart the practice. He wanted to provide funding, help me find new patients, even work alongside me to rebuild what was lost. Sarah felt like she was hearing about a completely different reality. But you never told me that. You were so angry, so hurt by what happened to our family. Your mother and I decided it would be better to let you focus on your own future, rather than get caught up in trying to fix the past. We told Dr. Williams we needed time to consider his offer. What happened to the offer? We were going to accept it, her father said quietly. But then I had the heart attack, and during my recovery, I realized I didn't want to go back to medicine. The stress had taken too much out of me. When Dr. Williams called again to check on my progress, I told him I was retiring and asked him to leave us in peace. Sarah sat in stunned silence as her father continued. He called one more time about a year ago to let me know he had established a scholarship fund for medical students from low-income families. He named it after our old clinic. He said it was the least he could do to honor the work we had done. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Sarah asked, feeling her entire world shifting. Because you were finally moving forward with your life. You seemed happy, successful, and I didn't want to reopen old wounds. I never imagined you would seek him out yourself. After ending the call, Sarah sat in her apartment, surrounded by wedding planning materials, feeling like she was living in someone else's life. The man she had planned to destroy had been trying to make amends all along. The revenge she had spent 3 years planning was based on an incomplete understanding of what had actually happened. But now she faced an even bigger problem. In 2 days, she would marry Marcus Williams under a false identity. He had no idea who she really was, and she had no idea how to tell him the truth without losing him forever. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, seeing both Emma Richardson, the successful marketing executive Marcus had fallen in love with, and Sarah Chen, the bitter daughter seeking revenge. Neither of those women felt real anymore. The person staring back at her was someone new, a woman who had discovered that love could grow in the most unexpected places, that truth was more complicated than she had imagined, and that sometimes the greatest courage required wasn't the strength to seek revenge, but the wisdom to seek understanding instead. Tomorrow night was her rehearsal dinner. In 2 days, she would either become Marcus's wife under false pretenses, or she would find the courage to tell him everything and hope that the love they had built together was strong enough to survive the truth. The rehearsal dinner was held at Marcus's favorite restaurant, a cozy place where they had shared their first real conversation months ago. Sarah wore a blue dress that Marcus had complimented before, but she felt like she was wearing a costume. Every toast, every warm smile from his family and friends, felt like another weight added to her chest. Marcus's best man, Dr. James Chen, stood to give a speech, and Sarah's blood ran cold when she heard the last name. But as he spoke, she realized it was just a coincidence. James was Korean American, not Chinese like her father, and he had known Marcus since medical school. Marcus has always been the most principled person I know, James said, raising his glass. Even when he makes mistakes, he finds a way to make them right. That's the kind of man Emma is marrying tomorrow. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. She was being praised for choosing a man whose integrity was exactly what made her deception so terrible. After dinner, Marcus walked her to her car. I can't believe that in 18 hours you'll be my wife, he said, pulling her close. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and discover this has all been a dream. Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but love and trust, and made a decision that surprised even her. Marcus, we need to talk, really talk. Can you come up to my apartment? Of course, he said, though she could see confusion in his expression. Is everything okay? In her apartment, Sarah poured them both wine, her hands shaking slightly. Marcus sat on the couch, watching her with growing concern. Emma, you're scaring me. What's going on? Sarah sat across from him, knowing that once she started talking, there would be no going back. Marcus, my name isn't Emma Richardson. It's Sarah Chen. Dr. Robert Chen was my father. The color drained from Marcus's face. He set down his wine glass and stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. That's not possible, he said quietly. Dr. Chen's daughter. She hated me. She blamed me for everything that happened to their family. She did hate you? Sarah said, tears beginning to flow. I hated you. For 3 years, I planned to destroy your life the way you destroyed ours. I created the Emma Richardson identity specifically to get close to you. Marcus stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. This whole relationship has been a lie? Everything we've shared, everything I've felt? No, Sarah said urgently, standing to face him. It started as a lie, but it's not anymore. I fell in love with you, Marcus. That was never part of the plan. How can I believe anything you say now? Marcus's voice was rising, and Sarah could see the pain and betrayal in his eyes. You've been lying to me for 10 months. You let me fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist. I exist, Sarah said desperately. The feelings I have for you are real. The woman you fell in love with is real. She's just not who you thought she was. Marcus began pacing the room, trying to process what he had learned. Your father, how is he? I tried to contact him so many times. He's alive, but he's never fully recovered from the heart attack. He's partially paralyzed and spends most of his time at home. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her with anguish. And you thought the best way to handle that was to trick me into falling in love with you? What was the endgame, Sarah? Were you going to wait until after we were married and then destroy me? Sarah couldn't deny it because that had been exactly her plan. Yes, she whispered. But I changed my mind. That's why I'm telling you the truth now. When did you change your mind? Yesterday, last week. How do I know this isn't just another part of your plan? The question hung in the air between them, and Sarah realized she couldn't answer it in a way that would satisfy either of them. The truth was complicated. Her feelings had been changing gradually over months, but she had been fighting against them until very recently. I don't know exactly when, she admitted. But I know that right now, sitting here with you, the thought of hurting you makes me sick. I love you, Marcus. That's why I had to tell you the truth. Marcus sat back down, putting his head in his hands. Do you have any idea what this does to me? I've spent 3 years living with the guilt of what I did to your family, trying to find a way to make amends. And all this time, you've been right here, pretending to love me while planning my destruction. I wasn't pretending, Sarah said, kneeling in front of him. Not about loving you. That became real despite everything else. Marcus looked up at her, and she could see he was crying. How can I trust you? How can I trust my own judgment? I thought I knew you better than anyone in the world. Talk to my father, Sarah said suddenly. He'll tell you the truth about everything. About your attempts to make amends, about the scholarship fund, about how he was actually willing to accept your help before his health problems got worse. You've talked to your father about me. I called him yesterday. Marcus, he doesn't hate you the way I thought he did. He's moved past the anger. He understands that what happened was a mistake, not malicious intent. They sat in silence for several minutes, both trying to process the magnitude of what had been revealed. Finally, Marcus spoke. The wedding is tomorrow. I know. All of our friends and family will be there. I know. What are we supposed to do now? Sarah took his hands in hers. I don't know. I know I love you, and I know I want to spend my life making up for the lies I've told. But I understand if you can't forgive me. Marcus pulled his hands away and stood up. I need time to think. This is too much to process right now. As he walked toward the door, Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. Marcus, wait. Are you calling off the wedding? He paused with his hand on the doorknob. I don't know, Sarah. I honestly don't know. After he left, Sarah collapsed on her couch, realizing that in trying to save her relationship by telling the truth, she might have destroyed it completely. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but instead, it might be the day she lost everything that had come to matter to her. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat by her phone, hoping Marcus would call, text, or show up at her door. By morning, she had received nothing. The wedding was scheduled for 4 o'clock, and she had no idea if the groom would even show up. At noon, she called Marcus's apartment, but there was no answer. She tried his cell phone and got voicemail. Finally, she called his mother. Mrs. Williams, this is Sarah. Has Marcus talked to you today? Oh, honey, he stopped by this morning and said there might be some complications with the wedding. He looked terrible. What's going on? Should I be worried? Sarah couldn't bring herself to explain everything over the phone. I'm not sure what's going to happen. If the wedding doesn't go forward today, I'll call everyone and explain. Sarah, dear, whatever is happening, just remember that love is worth fighting for. Marcus has never been happier than he's been with you. Those words both comforted and tormented Sarah as she prepared for a wedding that might not happen. She put on her dress, did her hair and makeup, and waited. At 3 o'clock, her phone finally rang. It was Marcus. Sarah, I've been thinking all night and most of today. Can you meet me at the church? Not for the wedding necessarily, but just to talk. Of course, she said, her heart pounding. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When she arrived, at the small chapel where they had planned to marry, she found Marcus sitting in the front pew, still wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of his wedding attire. He looked exhausted. You came, he said when he saw her in her wedding dress. I wasn't sure you would be here, she replied, sitting beside him, but leaving space between them. I almost wasn't, Marcus admitted. I spent the night walking around the city, trying to figure out how I felt about everything. And what did you decide? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I realized something important. The woman I fell in love with wasn't Emma Richardson. She was you, Sarah Chen. Emma was just a character you created, but every conversation we had, every moment we shared, every feeling you expressed, that was you. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. I was always myself with you, except for the lies about my background. But those weren't small lies, Sarah. You lied about your entire identity, your family, your history. You let me bare my soul to you about the biggest regret of my life. And you said nothing. I know, Sarah said, tears starting again. I know it was wrong. I was so consumed with the idea of revenge that I lost sight of everything else. Marcus turned to look at her directly. I called your father this morning. Sarah's eyes widened. You did? I needed to hear from him what really happened. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about your mother's death 6 months after the practice closed, how the stress of everything affected the whole family. He also told me about your years of anger and how you blamed me for destroying your family's entire future. What else did he tell you? He told me that he's been worried about you for the past year. You stopped visiting as much, you became secretive about your personal life, and you seemed to be carrying around anger that was eating you alive. He said he was hoping you had found someone who would help you let go of the past. Marcus paused, looking around the empty chapel. He also said something that surprised me. He said he forgave me a long time ago, and he's been hoping that somehow we could all find peace. He said that? He did, and he asked me to give you a message. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He wanted me to read this to you. With shaking hands, Marcus unfolded the paper and read, Sarah, my darling daughter, I know you think you were protecting me by seeking revenge, but what happened to our practice was never your burden to carry. I've watched you sacrifice your own happiness to try to fix something that was already broken. If you found love with Dr. Williams, don't let the mistakes of the past destroy your future. You deserve to be happy, and so does he. Forgive yourself, forgive him, and build something beautiful together. Sarah was crying openly now. He really said that? He did. And he said he would be honored to attend our wedding if we decided to go through with it. He's actually in the parking lot right now. My father is here? He insisted on coming when I told him what happened. He said he couldn't let his daughter make the biggest decision of her life without being here to support her. Marcus stood up and walked to the altar, looking back at Sarah. I won't pretend this is easy. Finding out that the woman I love has been lying to me about her identity is devastating. But your father helped me understand something important. You didn't fall in love with me despite seeking revenge. You gave up revenge because you fell in love with me. Sarah stood as well, hope and fear battling in her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you're willing to spend the rest of our lives being completely honest with each other, if you're willing to build a real relationship based on who we actually are, rather than who we pretended to be, then I want to marry you today. You want to marry Sarah Chen, not Emma Richardson? Marcus walked back to her and took her hands. Emma Richardson was perfect, but she wasn't real. Sarah Chen is complicated, flawed, capable of deception, and driven by fierce love for her family. She's also brave enough to give up years of planning to tell me the truth. That's the woman I want to marry. Even after everything I've done. We've both made mistakes that hurt people. The difference is what we do going forward. Marcus looked into her eyes. Sarah Chen, will you marry me? Not as Emma Richardson, not as part of some plan, but as yourself? Through her tears, Sarah nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want to marry you as myself. Marcus pulled her close and kissed her, and for the first time in their relationship, Sarah felt completely present in the moment. No lies, no hidden agendas, just two people who had found their way to love despite everything that should have kept them apart. There's just one thing, Sarah said as they broke apart. All the wedding invitations say Emma Richardson. Everyone is going to be very confused. Marcus laughed, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since her revelation. Well, Mrs. Chen soon-to-be Williams, I think it's time for you to meet some people properly, starting with your father, who's been waiting very patiently in the parking lot. 2 years later, Sarah Williams stood in the waiting room of the newly opened Chen Williams Community Health Clinic, watching her father examine a young mother with her newborn baby. The clinic was everything Robert Chen's original practice had been and more, a place where anyone could receive quality medical care, regardless of their ability to pay. Marcus had insisted on naming the clinic after both families, despite Sarah's protests. Your father's vision made this possible, he had said, and your love made it real. The wedding had gone forward that day, though not without some complicated explanations to confused guests. Sarah had stood at the altar and introduced herself to a room full of strangers as Sarah Chen, explaining that Emma Richardson had been a professional alias she had used for so long that it had become second nature. Most people accepted the explanation with good humor, though a few close friends had raised eyebrows. The hardest moment had been watching her father walk her down the aisle in his wheelchair, his partially paralyzed left side carefully hidden by his formal jacket. But when Marcus stepped forward to shake her father's hand and formally ask for permission to marry his daughter, Robert Chen had smiled for the first time in years. Take care of each other, he had said to both of them. You've both been through enough pain. The first year of marriage had been challenging. Building a relationship on honesty after beginning with deception required constant communication and patience. There were moments when Marcus would catch Sarah in small, harmless lies, saying she had eaten lunch when she hadn't, claiming she wasn't tired when she was, and they would have to stop and talk through why dishonesty had become such a habit for her. I spent 3 years creating a false identity, Sarah had explained during one of these conversations. Sometimes I forget that I don't need to manage the truth anymore. Marcus had been patient, understanding that trust needed to be rebuilt gradually. He had also been honest about his own struggles with forgiveness and doubt. Sometimes I wake up and remember that the woman sleeping next to me once planned to destroy my life, he had told her during a particularly difficult week. And then I remember that she gave up that plan because she loved me. Both things are true, and I'm learning to live with that complexity. But slowly they had built something real together. They learned each other's actual histories, met each other's real friends, and created new traditions based on their authentic selves rather than the fantasy relationship they had started with. The idea for the clinic had emerged 6 months into their marriage. Marcus had been volunteering at a free medical clinic across town, and Sarah had started working with a nonprofit that helped small businesses with marketing. One evening, they had been discussing the challenges facing low-income healthcare when Marcus had said quietly, "I keep thinking about your father's original clinic. What about it? Maybe it's time to build something new, not to replace what was lost, but to honor it." They had presented the idea to Robert Chen hesitantly, unsure how he would react. But her father had been enthusiastic, offering to help with the planning and even to return to practice, part-time if his health allowed. It would be good to feel useful. Again, he had said. The clinic had opened 6 months later in a renovated building in the same neighborhood. Where the original Chen clinic had operated, Marcus provided the funding and served as the primary doctor, while Robert worked 3 days a week seeing patients and training young medical residents. Sarah managed the business operations and community outreach, using her real marketing skills to build relationships with local organizations and insurance companies. The success had exceeded all of their expectations. The clinic served over 300 families and had a waiting list of doctors who wanted to volunteer their time. Marcus had also started a fellowship program that brought young doctors from privileged backgrounds to work in underserved communities, teaching them the values of accessible healthcare. Now, watching her father gently examine the newborn baby, Sarah felt a sense of peace she had never expected. The little girl couldn't have been more than 2 weeks old, and her teenage mother looked nervous and uncertain. "She's perfect," Robert Chen said softly to the young woman. "Her weight is good, her reflexes are strong, and she's obviously loved very much." The mother's face relaxed with relief. "I was so worried. I couldn't afford the regular checkups during my pregnancy, and I want to make sure she's okay." "We'll make sure you both stay healthy," Robert assured her. "Dr. Williams and I will see you as often as needed, and we have resources to help with anything else you need." After the patient left, Sarah joined her father in the examination room. "How are you feeling, Dad?" "Tired, but good tired," he said, slowly standing from his chair. "This is what I was meant to do." Marcus appeared in the doorway, having finished with his last patient of the day. "Ready to head home?" The three of them walked out together, past the framed photo in the lobby that showed the original Chen clinic from 25 years ago. Below it was a plaque that read, "In honor of all healthcare providers who serve their communities with compassion and dedication." As they reached the parking lot, Sarah's father stopped and looked back at the clinic. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "sometimes the best things come from the worst situations. I lost my first clinic because of pride and misunderstanding, but this new clinic exists because of love and forgiveness." Marcus put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Your father's right. None of this would have happened if we hadn't gone through everything we did." Sarah looked at the two most important men in her life, one who had given her the values that shaped her character, and one who had taught her that love was stronger than revenge. "I used to think that happiness meant getting even with people who hurt us, but it turns out that real happiness means building something better with them instead." As they drove home together, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. She had started with a plan for destruction and ended up creating something beautiful. She had sought revenge and found love instead. Most importantly, she had learned that the truth, no matter how complicated or painful, was always better than the most perfect lie. That evening, as she and Marcus sat on their front porch watching the sunset, Sarah felt truly at peace for the first time in years. Tomorrow they would return to the clinic, continue serving their community, and keep building the life they had chosen together. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was infinitely better than anything she could have imagined.